Hey guys, it's been a while since I've put out a character video, and I've kind of been procrastinating and trying to put this character off just because of the skill ceiling and the difficulty of playing this character well. But I finally decided it was time to try to tackle this. I still consider myself a novice at this character, but if I'm waiting to master this character, this video will likely never happen. So today we're going to be covering Rocket Groot. Big shout out to Ultimate Daz. Without his guide on the Discord and help from him in the Reddit chat, this video would never have happened at all. Uh, most all the information and techniques in this video are coming from him one way or another. So, big thanks to him for helping me improve my Rocket Groot play. Alright, let's start out with a broad overview of this character. First, we'll look at his trait, which is super strength. That's going to allow him to pick up heavy objects and throw them. That is nice, but it's not going to change much about the way you play the game. The next thing I would say about Rocket and Groot is Rocket and Groot is not for everyone. Rocket and Groot is actually pretty difficult to play, and aside from difficult, he is very different to play. It's a different play style, and part of that is because of the strengths and weaknesses of this character. It really kind of dictates the way this character can be played. So that's the first thing I would want you to know about this character is, he may be for you. You may find that refreshing that there's something different out there, or then again, you might just find that it's a pain to try to play someone that plays completely different than anyone else in the game. So let's just look at the good news and the bad news with this character. We'll start with the bad news first. Bad news first is this character is hard to gear because of the fact that his tags are mixed and that you're using a mixture of basic attacks and abilities. You're going to find that it's hard to come up with enough ISO to optimally gear this character. The next bad news is he does very little stagger damage. He has very little crowd control, so he's not good at controlling enemies. And then the last bit of bad news is that if you're looking for big spiky damage burst, this guy is not going to bring those. The only skill that he really has with much burst is his slam, called We Are Groot, and that one has a fairly long animation, so not the best choice for burst damage by any means. But there is good news. The good news is that he has probably the best EP sustain in the game when you play him optimally. And that enables the last piece of good news I'm going to give you, and that's the reason people would pick this character, is that EP sustain allows him to have probably the best sustained damage in the game as far as the amount of damage he can put over a long period of time. Let's look at the light attack. The light attack is coming from Rocket, so it's going to have an energy tag. This is the longest combo in the game. It is a 20-shot combo. You get 19 shots at regular damage, and then the 20th shot that finishes the combo off does approximately 5 times more damage than the 19 preceding shots. I feel like this is a somewhat underrated skill that Rocket has. It's easy to sleep on this, but you can land this from a long distance off, and it actually locks on pretty good once you get pointed at an enemy. And if there's any reason you can't get within melee distance of an enemy, then it's always great to be pelting them with this skill. Let's look at the heavy attack. The heavy attack is coming from Groot, so that's going to have a melee tag, and the heavy attack is a 3-hit combo sequence. So that was the first heavy combo in the game. One thing that you need to know is that because this is two heroes in one, Rocket can perform his light attack at the same time that Groot is performing his heavy attack. So if you hold down the light attack button and roll your thumb over or use another finger or whatever your technique is for holding one button and pressing another, you can do that and pull off both of these basic attacks at the same time. for speedy EP refill and extra damage with your basics. I will warn you that this can be hard on your thumb, and after playing this for about a day, your thumb may never be the same. So the last basic attack, and the one that everyone always seems to forget to mention, is the air attack. The air attack is performed by Groot. You do have to use the heavy attack button from the air, not the light one, but the heavy one. Make sure to use that heavy attack button. It is melee tagged because this skill is coming from Groot, and it's just your run of the mill slam into the ground type air attack. Okay, and Groot's first skill is Quantum Igniter. This is a rocket skill, so it has the energy damage tag, and this skill has the beam synergy tag. That means you can combine it with an area, barrage, safeguard, or whirlwind for a reflect synergy, or you can combine it with another beam for the resonant blast synergy, or an explosive tagged skill for the mega blast synergy. So that's all your available synergies with this skill. This skill is your primary means of damage with Rocket and Groot, so you have to like this skill. You don't have a choice. If you're going to play this character, this is one you're going to have to get used to. So some of the properties of this beam: it gives you 6 ticks of damage per second, and it does pierce or penetrate like all other beams in this game. Now, something that is a little bit different is the path of this beam is not stable like it is with other characters. It tends to drop or wander off target, which actually makes this beam more usable from a short distance. Now, that may seem like a bad thing, but it actually works out okay in Rocket and Groot's case. Now, something that's unique to Rocket and Groot: if you use R to cast this ability, you will be able to move around. So Rocket's firing the beam, you're running around the map as Groot. You can dodge and jump and all that kind of stuff, all while firing this beam. If you use the ZR key to fire this beam and force a synergy, you will be locked in place, so do be aware of that. Now, Daz has found a way to kind of glitch out of this. I have been unable to duplicate it, but I did want you guys to know that this technique exists, so maybe you will be or have more luck than I did duplicating this. But the way that he has explained this to me is you hold down ZR, you cast We Are Groot, which is a slam skill, and then toward the end of that animation of We Are Groot, you cast the beam, and if it's in the right frame or two there, then you'll kind of glitch out of that lockdown. You'll force the beam synergy, but also be able to move around. So good luck to you on that one. I haven't been able to duplicate it, but that has not really slowed me down as far as being able to use Rocket and Groot. So don't feel like that one's a deal breaker if you can't pull it off. Rocket and Groot's second ability is called Vine Whip. This is a Groot ability, so it has the melee damage tag, and this ability has the barrage synergy tag, which means you can combine it with an area or barrage tagged skill for the crash synergy, with a beam for the reflect synergy, with any element or a whirlwind for an elemental barrage, or with a rapid fire skill for the ricochet synergy. It is worth pointing out that Rocket and Groot cannot use abilities simultaneously. So no rocket beam into the Groot barrage, unfortunately. Other than that, there's not a lot to talk about with this. It's your pretty run-of-the-mill barrage skill, but there is one detail that I will point out, and that is that this is a barrage that you're going to want to use, much like Wolverine's. You want to tap this skill, let it go through its animation, and then recast it. You're not going to want to just hammer the button. And the reason for that is the last hit of this barrage hits significantly harder than the hits before it. So when I say significantly harder, I mean the last hit is worth about 14 of the hits that precede it. So that is the big thing to know about this barrage skill. Rocket and Groot's third skill is called Minefield. This is a rocket skill, so it has the energy damage tag, and this skill has the explosive synergy tag. that means that you will be able to combine it with a beam skill, an element skill, or a burst skill to get the Mega Blast synergy, or you can combine it with a slam for the eruption synergy. The other thing to know about this is because it is a rocket ability that you can use R to cast this and move about while this is being cast. And you can cast this, there's a delay on the explosion, so you can cast this and follow it up with his last skill for a self synergy. Rocket and Groot's fourth and final skill is called We Are Groot. So this last ability here is a Groot ability, so it has the melee damage tag, and this particular skill has the slam synergy tag. That slam synergy tag means that you can combine with a bash skill for the shockwave synergy, with any elemental type skill for the catalyst synergy. You can combine with an explosive for the eruption synergy, with another slam for the tremor synergy, or with a whirlwind for the calamity synergy. So this is the best burst damage skill that Groot has in his kit. It has a nice AoE, but it does have a rather long animation of 1.67 seconds, and it does hit twice. That's something to note as well, is that it has an initial hit and then it hits again at the end of its animation. So you can, as I stated earlier, self-synergize by casting Minefield and then following with We Are Groot. And then you can also switch to another character to synergize with that second hit on this attack. And then another thing you can kind of do to mess with the synergies on this attack would be to cast Minefield and then to ZR cast We Are Groot. And you will typically get the because you're getting the explosive synergy with Minefield, you can generally get a different synergy with the ZR cast of We Are Groot and get some multiple synergy damage going that way as well. Now that we've looked at Rocket and Groot's abilities, let's look at the thing that Ultimate Daz's guide pointed out early on that actually makes this a viable pick in this game. Without this, Rocket and Groot would be very lackluster in my opinion. But this is the discovery that made them an actual viable pick, and that is that Rocket and Groot can do their attacks simultaneously. And I'm not talking about the light attack, heavy attack. I'm talking about Rocket's quantum igniter and Groot's heavy basic attack. So to do this, you do have to do a little bit of adjustment on your skills menu. So what you're going to want to do is go into your team menu. You're going to want to go into Rocket and Groot. You're going to press the R key a couple of times till you're in your skills menu. You're going to want to highlight the skill that is on the X button, and you're going to want to press X. And now you're going to have a menu. If you scroll all the way to the bottom of that menu, you should have the option to unassign this skill. So if you turn that skill off, your X key is now always and forever a heavy attack button. So what you can do now is hold down the R button, hold down the button that has quantum igniter assigned to it, and tap X at the same time. And this will allow you to have the simultaneous beam and Groot heavy attack. You can also move your other skills around using the same technique. Obviously, you have to have beam assigned to a key, but if you prefer some other combination besides what you have left, you can change those skills. So if you'd like to retain the ability to use Vine Whip instead of Minefield, for instance, you can go into those keys and change those skills around. Since you're using an ability and a basic attack more or less all the time, you are going to have a couple of benefits that come with that. The number one benefit is that if you're able to more or less consistently work in heavy attacks while you're using your beam, that you are going to sustain your EP at a level that is unmatched by any other character in this game. You're always going to have energy to keep that beam going. The other thing is that because your beam is an ability, and if it's leveled all the way up, the last level of that ability is going to be resist being interrupted while using this ability. You're going to have that more or less baked into your kit. So you're going to always be resisting interruption while attacking, and then you're going to have great EP sustain on top of that. A quick note, if you're going to attempt to use Rocket and Groot in some of the harder content in this game, number one, I would absolutely once again stress that I would suggest using a different character to do stagger damage and get that stagger bar worked down to a sliver before going in with Rocket and Groot. Or I would suggest using him in a co-op party where someone else is responsible for staggering the enemy, because it's just going to be a real challenge to play the harder gauntlets with Rocket and Groot if you're not using one of those two methods. But if you decide that you want to go for the challenge, a tip I would give you is that uh, maybe don't worry too much about trying to get the heavies in consistently to keep the EP up. I would use the beam, use the advantage that the mobility and the beam gives you. Sneak in the heavies when you can. If you run out of EP, you always have your light attack to fall back on. Don't sleep on that light attack. It is very good for just chipping away at health bars, and it does add up over time. So that would be my advice if you want to try to play him in a harder content without either using another character to stagger or not having another party member stagger the enemy. Let's quickly talk about your options for ISO on Rocket and Groot. There's not a lot to discuss here. The fact that Rocket scales from energy damage and that Groot scales from melee damage, and that you are using an ability with Rocket and a basic attack with Groot, you will very quickly find that you are more or less going to get optimal results from just the plain old purple percent damage to enemies. Another one that might be a good choice is the newer damage to powerful enemies. I think that would be a good choice as well, but I think the optimal choice is the percent damage to enemies purple ISO. So getting enough of that to deck him out is quite a challenge. Another ISO that is certainly worth consideration, especially in the harder content, is just going to be your plain green damage resistance ISO. So those are the ISO I would recommend for Groot and Rocket. All right, so end of the day, what are my feelings on Rocket and Groot? I think that he's very situational, and he really shines in some situations, and then other situations he struggles more. And to really explain that better, I want to recap his pros and cons real quickly. On the pro side of things, he can use his heavies simultaneously with his beam attack. That allows him to sustain his EP, so he has that damage always coming out from the beam attack. The always present beam also allows him to resist being interrupted, and then that is also a giant opportunity for the rest of your team to be able to synergize with that beam because it's always there. You can't overlook how big of a pro that is, that you always have an attack present that can be synergized with. The other thing is that Rocket and Groot can always bring something to the fight because he has the ability to attack from range or at close quarters. So he can bring something in almost any situation. Now, the con side of Rocket and Groot, if you remember, he has almost no stagger damage. He just doesn't have any meaningful stagger damage whatsoever in his kit, uh, and no crowd control either. So that's two of the places where he just really kind of falls down. And then the one that is the biggest con to me is that his heavy attack that you're using to maintain your EP is very slow and clunky. And for a character that has the ability to move while attacking, the fact that I'm trying to work in these real slow, clunky attacks with that was the biggest con. That was the thing that I was like, man, I wish that he felt a little snappier while working in these heavy attacks, because it just kind of takes away from the fact that you can run around while using that beam, because you got to work those in to sustain it. So that's the pros and cons. And here's kind of the way I look at this character fitting in because of those lists. Co-op play, you got somebody else that is staggering the enemy. uh, Rocket Groot's amazing. He's giving you this ever-present window of opportunity to synergize with Beam. He's bringing sustained damage, and he's always contributing to HP damage. He's awesome, top tier for co-op play in my mind. If you're the kind of player who switches often, you've got different characters with different jobs. You've got a guy that's going to stagger enemies. You got one guy that's going to, take out trash mobs. You got a guy that's going to stagger enemies. And then when you get a boss staggered, you're going to switch to Rocket and Groot. You're going to beam that boss and heavy. And you got teammates who can synergize with that beam. I'm going to put him pretty high up on that tier list. Not quite as high as on the co-op tier list, but he shines. He's good in that situation. He's absolutely a good pick for that playstyle. Now, if you're the kind of player who likes to get on a character and just play that character, that is where you're going to struggle a lot more with Rocket and Groot. It's going to take a lot more skill. You're going to be having to dodge a lot because you're not able to stagger bosses. You're not able to control enemies. That's going to be where you're going to run into a lot more trouble with Rocket and Groot, especially on the more difficult content in the game. So you're going to have to break out those defensive ISOs for sure if you're adopting that play style. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed. Once again, a huge thank you to Ultimate Daz for his Discord guide and for his help. And I will see you guys next time.